So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray. Hello, soil lovers. Regen Ray here, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. I'm really excited to get this new season underway, and I hope you're enjoying the conversations that are going to take us through the Christmas period. I am joined with Liana today from Climate Force. How are you doing?
Hi, Ray. Thank you so much for having me on today. And I'm doing great, besides the fact I woke up with my voice gone, which is unusual, but I'd really like to continue on today anyway. So I hope everyone can understand me.
I'm sure they will. And Murphy's Law is always present. The day that you need to use your voice, it disappears. But you've showed up anyway, and that's the main thing. We love that kind of energy. And so you are very busy in the Daintree area. Share with our soil lovers the project that you're working on and what kind of keeps you busy and why you've showed up with your hands dirty today.
Yep. So Climate Force is a regen organization run by a group of young people, which is exciting because there's a lot of innovation and problem solving that takes place basically as we go. And we're working on a 350-acre piece of land that we're kind of taking on piece by piece. And the sole focus is regenerating native trees, because we're sandwiched in between two World Heritage sites, which is the Daintree rainforest and the Great Barrier Reef, and also between the Daintree River. So it's quite a special little spot where we're working. So it feels really important for that. This land has been fallowed for a number of years. So it was previously used as in agriculture as an organic banana farm. And so it's basically covered in weeds, guinea grass, more to the point. And it's proving to be quite a challenge. But yeah, so our sole focus, like I was saying, is to plant native trees, but then also on the side, we're growing community gardens and food forests and trying to incorporate as much community interaction and activities as possible, because I sort of take on this theme where the rainforest is full of diversity, and the more diversity we can have with different people and skills and just hands on the earth, it seems to also really help that this land that we're working on flourish and thrive more so.
Awesome. And so I know that your goal from the website is to plant 360,000 plus native trees in the area. Where did that number come from? Is it like someone's done the map views and seen that that's kind of what we took away from it and we're rebuilding it, or we doing plus more?
So that number would have come from the area of land that we're regenerating, and it takes about 100 to 150 trees in 1 hectare to regenerate a hectare of land with rainforest trees. So that's generally the number of trees you have in a hectare. And that's not even including like the amount of biodiversity of different species of insects and animals and birds and shrubs. And so we're just talking trees, but obviously a rainforest is filled with 7 different layers of life. And yeah, so that number would have been measured according to the amount of land there is, and that's how many trees it's going to take us to really regenerate that land, which is a lot. And I'm Nursery Manager, so I'm just like pumping out seedlings and thousands of trees yearly, which is pretty amazing as well. It's quite a learning process, because in the rainforest up here, so I don't know if soil lovers present are aware that the Daintree is the oldest rainforest in the world, which is pretty special. And yeah, the reasons that is, we have 13 out of 19 of the world's most primitive species found here, which is a really high level of diversity of ancient trees in this region. And so where was I heading with that? So being in this rainforest, some seeds or fruit, only fruit every 5 years, every 10 years, some only every 15 years, once in 15 years, which is really a matter of like being at the right place at the right time and searching for those seeds at that time when they're actually fruiting. And so that's what I meant by how much learning there is involved, because there's species that I've never even worked with before that I'm finding different ones year after year. So it's very interesting, and it feels very special to be a part of a project like this and to know that we're essentially recreating an ecosystem and inviting habitat for cassowaries and tree kangaroos and different insects and all sorts of different rare species to live in once again.
Yeah, I love that.
So
I think
that's
it's a great project to be, part of, and, you're working with every single kind of seedling that goes through that nursery that is going to be planted. Are you keeping a tally? Do you have like a little whiteboard or a chalkboard where you're like writing down the number of trees and how far into that tree?
So we're really into data. So when I say innovation, we collect all of the data and we geotag every tree that's planted. So we're doing sort of like, we have all these different Google sheets where we have species information lists. And so every single batch of seedling trays that we work with has a batch ID. And so at the moment I'm up to like 3,000 and something, and it's going to have to refresh and start again because the batch IDs just like end up being obviously in their thousands. But it's a really good way of tracking different things like germination rates. So I'm trying to work out why batch 150 had a germination rate of 98%, but batch 300 had a germination rate of 2%, and they're the same species. So it's really helping us understand how to improve our own processes and methods, and just to keep track of everything as well, because of all the different species and all the different variations that come with the different fruits and the seeds that we're working with. Some take up to 12 months to germinate. Others take 2 years. Some take 2 to 3 weeks. So we're trying to create also data on seed banking and different processes required for different species. And I think a lot of this is quite unexplored in the wet tropics. So obviously every different region requires different sort of methods because we're working in different environments. So yeah, any books that I've read that are regenerative that come from northern New South Wales or other southern areas don't quite apply to the wet tropics.
Yeah, no, that's right. It's, got to take, I always say that like the land is as unique as fingerprints. And so you need to take a kind of bespoke experience, a method to all that. And you're obviously finding that as well. You mentioned as well that a lot of, you're working with a lot of younger people. How are you finding the adoption for this type of regenerative movement in the younger crowd? Like, what's the reason why so many younger people are being attracted to this type of project?
Yeah, well, we have people coming from all over the world, especially now that people are able to travel again. And especially people from their early 20s seem very, very interested. And I think it's kind of proving to be like a bubble of light in the darkness, because I found, say, people in different European countries that just have gone through long lockdowns and been in cities or, stuck in their rooms or their apartments, which I can't imagine because I live in a really wide open environment and hardly was affected by COVID, in all honesty. But so a lot of these younger people seem to really want to be a part of something that's bigger than them individually and feel like they can be involved in something that is helping the environment and learning. A lot of people are really interested in learning about how to garden, different methods of growing food. It seems to be very, very important, food security for the future. I think that's something that a lot of younger people are in fear of. And so, yeah, a part of being a part of something that is helping regenerate land, but also the learning seems to be something they're very interested in. And we're all learning through it. It's really like that diversity, like I was saying, is so beautiful, because the different people that come also have different skills and different knowledge that they share. And for us to gather together on a land, and so this project is also organic, which is so beautiful, being a World Heritage Site and having the Great Barrier Reef so near, but it's also hugely challenging. So it's almost like we literally, when we go out to the paddocks, and we have to go through and hand weed the rows of trees that we've planted out. And it's kind of like a fitness regime, because there's so much land for us to go through. We're literally practicing mindfulness and breathing and trying to keep good posture. Otherwise, we're going to have backaches after a couple of hours. And I think a lot of people see this as kind of like back grueling and really labor intensive kind of work, but it creates a real bond amongst the group of us that get together and do, really sweat and get into the elements. And it's either pouring rain or it's really hot. Like it's quite intense. So I can see that the people that come get very challenged at the start, but then they become so resilient after about a week or two. And it's just a really good way of breaking down any social barriers and connecting to that, what I feel is the more core part of a person without the masks. So, yeah.
You've touched on so many amazing things. Just to rehash the soil lovers, the fact that you went, like people are attracted to that, to see the light in the darkness. I think that was really, don't want to kind of glaze over that. I think like there are so many things that aren't feeling right or not aligning or are not kind of the vision of the future that we kind of grew up in. And so we kind of need to be the change that we want to see. And I love the fact that people are attracting themselves to, a project like this that gives them a little bit of light and hope, and connectivity to the soil and food security, but also then practicing like meaningful work that leaves an impact that's bigger than them, and purpose, and then also meditating and mindfulness. It's like such a great little bundle all put into one. And so is this run by volunteers, or are people like paid to be there? Is it work? Like, is it, do people work full time and then come here and volunteer? Like, how does that all kind of work?
Yes, so we have a very lean team that is paid staff. So at the start, it was basically, I started off on the land by myself, just starting off by collecting the seeds. And it was myself and the founder of Climate Force, Barney, but he was sort of behind the fundraising and the computer and the emails and things like that. And so I was like caring for the land and trying to get everything up and running. And then after about 9 months, we had another employee join us, Jack, who is the land manager. And since then, it's been like pretty big for the three of us to run. And that's where the volunteers started getting involved. And so they're not paid, but because we're growing food, forests and gardens, they get food and accommodation provided for them. And the accommodation is in a really beautiful spot that's overlooking the Great Barrier Reef. And we've managed to like secure a really beautiful house for people to stay in, and also on the farm, which has all the like medicinal gardens and different vegetables and different herbs, and then papaya orchard that I planted out only after eight or 10 months, just started absolutely blooming with the healthiest, most delicious papayas that I personally have ever eaten. So there's a lot of rewards for the people that come and work with us. And it's very holistic. It seems like there's a real therapeutic and mental health side connected with working with the land. And I'm seeing that more and more, that I'm very grateful that it seems to be able to create a safe space for people to actually delve deeper into their own emotions around things that they don't like that's going on with the direction that we're heading as a collective in humanity, and wanting to, so like just tapping back into that light in the darkness, wanting to do something but not sure what they can do or what they can be a part of to feel like they are doing something that is going to help change that, because I'm sure it must be very disheartening for especially the younger generation uprising now, seeing how much species are going extinct daily, and just all of the doom and gloom out there. It gets pretty heavy, I think. And so that holistic side feels like it's just organically flowed into place, but it's very important. And I feel like it's like that whole vision of the tree. You've got the roots and the soil, which is so important, and that sustains the tree, but then you need the trunk and the leaves and the fruit and everything. It's like that whole picture is a part of regenerating the land and also healing as humans, I feel.
Yeah, I love that. It sounds like a magical place to be at, like the way you've just described that, living, and I agree that, like, shelter and food and being able to even experience the knowledge and the connectivity and the cross-pollination of like humans that come through that space. I think that's a reward that most people wouldn't get. And probably, I would know, probably it is better than money, like being paid to do a job that you hate, or go into a place like this and you kind of just leave with your whole cup full and fulfilled, and you see the world from a different angle and a different space. Like, that's life lessons that you're going to take with you. I think, where do you sign up? Like, how do you get involved to be a volunteer? Is it like, where do I sign up?
Oh, we are so encouraging of volunteers coming and helping us. And like what you say about the money, it's pure passion work. Hey, like the money is really not what keeps us going. We could probably get better pay in a cafe. So, but so we go through Workaway and Woofing Australia, and just general, that's sort of our main platforms at the moment of finding new volunteers, but then word of mouth and other people that have been here share it with their friends. And we have a lot of space on the farm, as you can probably understand with how much land there is. So wet season's coming up, which might get a little bit wet and muddy, but we have a huge old banana farm packing shed that we've, like, when we first walked in, Barney and I remember it was literally just, it had like a meth lab in one corner, rubbish and stuff everywhere, and like piles of manure, and it was disgusting. And from that point to where we're at today, we've really tried to make it a cozy, nice space for people to have a little kitchen and have a little smoker area and a little reading area. We've now got an office, which is amazing. So we're kind of like, we're very grassroots, but the rate that we're upgrading is very inspiring and hopeful. And it's just literally step by step and day by day.
What's something on the farm or in this project that you've been like the most proud of to be a part of? Can you take us to that feeling and what it's like?
I love finding large-lipped green frogs in the nursery. So when I see a big green frog and little babies on the trees and the plants, that brings me a lot of joy. All sorts of different birds. So we have, yesterday I saw a little sunbird nest hanging on the nursery door, and they've been hanging around the last few days, just like flying in and out, and it was nice to see that they found their spot. And also just all sorts of different wildlife, really beautiful kingfishers on the farm and big owls. And I think it's knowing that we are in harmony with nature and with the wildlife is what really brings me deep joy.
And have you seen that wildlife and the biodiversity improve since your work starting there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And especially in a permaculture sense, because I have been a practicing permaculturist for a number of years, and with the food forest that we're growing, but then also the flowers and the different gardens that we're growing has attracted a lot of bees and a lot of different insects, and just really encouraging, rather than an abandoned grass plain, diversity, to find space to nest with all the diversity that we've created. So that's been a huge milestone for us.
And how long has the project been going on for?
So since February last year. So we're coming into nearly our second year,
Wow.
or completing the second year.
Everything you've just explained has happened in less than 12 months.
So fast. That's what I'm saying. Like, honestly, how quickly nature responds to the diversity implemented in the earth is incredible. And maybe it's fast tracked because we are in such a vibrant, healthy ecosystem in general, like the rainforest. But yeah, it's actually really amazing how fast the land has responded. And like, for example, the papaya, the food forest that we've grown, like the papaya trees that we've grown, because we're organic, we've literally planted out the papaya trees in a row, planted turmeric in amongst it, and then some bunchosias, which is like a peanut butter tree that fruits in a year. So we're just trying to focus on fast growing trees first, so that volunteers and people that work with us can have food, instantly off the tree, that like life source that you can just take and eat there and then, which is amazing. And some ferns in between. And there's literally no weeding, hardly any fertilizing that I've had to do. And there we do have pest problems because I think we're very exposed. It does attract lots of different insects. So working with them organically as well, but they've been pretty easy to get on top of. But like the abundance and the health of those pawpaws and the size of them is just incredible. Like, I've worked on the largest pawpaw farm in far north Queensland for a number of years, and the amount of effort and just like tons of fertilizer, tons of pesticides, tons of chemicals that was poured onto the farm and into the land just shocked me. And so to go from there and to be a part of creating this now, which honestly needs hardly any work once it's implemented and it's set up and it's so abundant, is also really, really hopeful and amazing. So that's
I thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I think a lot of people need to hear the fact that things can work so effortlessly. And sometimes when we reflect on why there is resistance for traditional, or for conventional farmers to go into this regenerative space, we often get presented with this thing of, is it the ego that's going to have nothing to do? Do you have farmers put their net worth to the point of like me being busy on a tractor or me being busy on the land equaling like net worth? And then when you outsource it, I guess to some degree to nature, like you've just shared this amazing story where you've worked in one of the largest farms and they just use tons of chemicals and probably really busy and exhausted to get product that was smaller and less yield than what is happening naturally and organically. It's just kind of, and I agree, like the soil that you're working with now is probably different, but that says a million words in itself as well. The fact that in high fertility, healthy soil, things just naturally flourish and grow, and so, yeah, it's interesting. And I think it's so great that you've been able to see those two different worlds so transparently and be able to now, recap on that and reflect on it.
Yeah, it's been a big journey trying to understand why a lot of these farms conventionally are just taking so much from the soil and aren't a self-sufficient or sustainable practice. And also just when you say being exhausted too, I guess you can really kind of see the farmer, how they are on a personal level and how they deal with life and their stresses and their struggles and their angers. And that was a big part of the conventional farming world that I was in, and very much saw a lot of consumerism a part of that. And it's not like attacking that or anything. I look at it with a lot of compassion now, because I see that it's not a means that's truly productive or healthy or wholesome. So yeah, I see that with compassion. But to journey from that and to really try and understand how can we be a part of, because I believe in a lot of ways we are what we eat. So if those chemicals and those fertilizers are needed to go into the earth, and as a human, we're also consuming that. And do we really need to be kept functioning with so many different chemicals and things? And so trying to understand how can we eat and grow food that doesn't need to take so much from the soil and is going to give back to. And to be honest, with our food forest, it did take a bit of time. So like I said, we had to, once it was implemented, nature took its own course, but that implementation was very important. And composting and mulch and as much soil organic matter and encouraging that organic matter to thrive and flourish has been a huge part of it. And so like, rotten pawpaws, I'll always throw them back into the ground because I know that they're just going to go back into the earth. And yeah, they attract rats and bugs and all sorts of things. But I've been learning to not see any enemies in nature because I see that there's a big war on pests and a war on weeds and war against a lot of nature's own natural processes. And I personally believe that there is a deep intelligence in nature and that it's doing its thing because it knows what it's doing. And I think you learn that the more you work with fungi and
this whole
different types of fungi.
Yeah, this whole human intervention of like we need to control and be master of like what we're putting on and when and cycles, and even like not observe. Permaculture principle is to observe. So many. Oh, it's June the 15th. We need to do this today. Because the calendar said so. But it's like we're in a different season than what we're currently in, and and I think we definitely need to learn that art of reading the landscape and literacy of the landscape and nature and all that. On that note, soil lovers, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dig deeper into this topic of war on weeds. I love how you've framed it like that, and let's see what weeds are all about. Stick with us. Hello, soil lovers. I hope you're enjoying today's guest and this podcast, but I wanted to just let you know that when you get excited about soil, just as you're hearing about our guests, then you will want to check out the Soil Learning Centre. The Soil Learning Centre is a hub that we put together and digitalized all the content over the years that were originally on DVD into this online learning experience. So if any of our guests or any of the topics that we speak about during the podcast whet your appetite and you want to get your hands dirtier and dig deeper and get educated around different things around soil, whether it be biodynamics, permaculture, whether it be using a microscope, or whether it just be hanging out with other like-minded educators, mentors, and facilitators, then the Soil Learning Centre is a place for you to hang out and dig deeper. That's the soillearningcentre.com. We have lots of different programs, courses, and even a membership. So if you want to belong to a community of other soil lovers, then that's the place to hang out. Well, until we meet again, enjoy the rest of this podcast. Back to the program. Welcome back, soil lovers. You're hanging out with Regen Ray and Liana from the Daintree Rainforest and Climate Force. I've loved how you've been sharing all about this war on weeds. And I think that's a really kind of interesting way of taking on it, because I think, we see weeds as like this enemy. And you even said, not having this idea of, anything in nature having been an enemy. Can you explore a little bit more of like what you're observed with the power of weeds and what they're actually trying to tell us and the benefits of mimicking a beautiful rainforest?
Yeah, so my journey started with weeds when I traveled to Europe, and I found that there were a lot more options of working with organic farms, which was a really eye-opening experience for me. And then I started working with a herbalist over there who we would literally go out to the forest and different parts of the countryside and collect different weeds and make tinctures out of them. And people in high demand would come and buy these tinctures for different ailments and illnesses. And it was amazing how many people were cured from high blood pressure or thyroid dysfunctions, all sorts of different things. Literally, I remember talking to him. He was a wealth of knowledge. And so these are European weeds, which are totally different in a lot of ways from what we have here in Australia. But I found talking to him that literally every weed had a healing benefit, literally. And so coming back with that knowledge here to Australia, I started to learn more and more about the different weeds growing just in my own garden when I was just gardening and growing food forests, and finding that as hard as it was to find information about certain weeds in this country, that it was the same story. A lot of these weeds are fixating different nutrients into the soil. So, and then since we started to plant out these trees with Climate Force, we've got about 6,500 trees in the ground now. And I was sharing about this grass that's dominating the land at the moment. And the rhizome in the grass is very dominating, and it actually sends out a chemical that makes it really hard for broadleaf green trees to grow. So we've done our best to go out and hand weed most of this grass and mulch it. So the grass is there, but we can chuck it into a pile and use that as mulch later, and even use the clippings as mulch. But the really interesting process through the actual intensive labor per se, has been that after the grass has been removed, the different weeds and the diversity of weeds that have started to grow back are really telling a story of what I believe the land needs. And so, for example, we have one particular weed off the top of my head is Mimosa pudica, or sensitive weed. And you might know that all around Australia. And this weed, people generally don't like it because it's got little thorns on it. I remember running around as a kid in the garden, and we called them prickles because they'd always spike our feet because we'd be barefoot. And so it was generally hated. But more studies, I found that this weed actually helps to bring nitrogen out of the air that plants can't use, and convert it into nitrogen in the earth that plants can use. And it's also highly medicinal, so really good for the nervous system. The whole plant can be used as a tea, and depression, anxiety, stress, it's just a huge relief if you use that plant medicinally. So seeing actually the rich diversity coming up in our rows has been very, very hopeful. And seeing that, once that dominated grass species is removed, and we haven't sprayed it, because I actually think if we were to spray it, that would kill a lot of that biodiversity in the soil and wouldn't encourage the other species of weeds to come up. And there's wild passion fruit popping up. There's also dormant native rainforest seeds that are starting to actually have a chance to breathe and come up as well. So because we haven't gone in with this angle of spray it all, which unfortunately, and I understand why, I totally understand why, but it's so much work. But most large areas of land management practices use that spraying technique. We are able to see more so what's coming back, what's growing back naturally, trying to understand why that's growing back, and seeing that a lot of those other weeds that are growing back, the rows. So we are, when I say we're a part of innovation, we're doing scientific experiments on all the different rows so that we can see which method of weed management is most efficient and time efficient. And so one of the methods is we found that the rows that we've left the weeds in, and they grow to a certain height but not taller than the tree, the trees in those rows are growing a lot better than the trees that have been completely hand weeded out in. And the reason being, we believe, and we were doing soil tests to also confirm our observations, is that they're firstly and foremost providing shade for the tree and retaining moisture in the soil. So my understanding is that weeds only grow because the earth needs a band-aid to cover it, to protect the soil from the sun. So something needs to grow there.
Yeah, that is so awesome that you're doing tests like that, because that would go against most people's thought pattern of you need to take away those plants that are under the tree because they're competing. You know, we come from this mindset of scarcity and competition, and the plants that are around the tree base are competing and taking the minerals, what would be available for the tree. And yet you have this experience where you're observed that keeping the grass there that's shorter than the tree height is actually creating shade, keeping the moisture there, collecting free dew in the morning, and probably watering for free, and feeding the plant more minerals. So it's a complete different mindset of it's competing. and so that's really interesting that we're going to start seeing more of that kind of testing happening and data to kind of back it up, which will then hopefully provoke the right type of thinking, to make people realize that, the whole movement of companion planting, I think, is really powerful as well, where you plant things that this plant's taking nitrogen, but this plant's putting it back in, and this one's going to be a calcium fixing plant. And I think that's really beautiful from a kind of permaculture and, nature's working together and not competing and against it.
Yeah, I personally think it's essential, because with that diversity of whether it's weeds or plants that you plant or different trees, rather than competing, it's actually creating more diversity and organic matter in the soil, and encouraging that mycorrhizal fungi to grow and spread and do its thing. And so I think, from that conventional farming perspective of that bacteria-based system in the soil, which is not really that, not looking after each other, it's that competitive system that you're talking about, which I always just see the reflection of nature and humanity. It's interesting. And then bringing in that diverse system is like, yeah, there is competitiveness in nature, but there is also so many symbiotic relationships and supportive relationships. And yeah, to change. So that's the challenge for us, to change that bacteria-based system into this more fungi-dominated system. And we need those weeds. We need all this diversity to do that. Otherwise, we're going to be out there for the next 10 years spraying the weeds around the tree, because it's not creating its own underground web network of mycelium. And yeah, it's just for me, leading back into that understanding of the intelligence of nature again, and how a lot of the time, if you let it do its work undisturbed, and you're not digging deep into the soil and fallowing and disturbing all that network of mycelium, then it becomes more rich, more fertile, is able to look after itself better as well. So yeah, that competitiveness, that competitive idea is I don't really understand it personally.
I know. And we speak a lot with our, students and people that we work with and mentor and coach in regards to seeing weeds and like reframing the paradigm, and calling them, well, technically they're kind of like succession, but people don't really understand the whole idea of succession, that one plant needs to exist to take out the next plant, and it kind of moves along this succession plan. But I try and reframe them as like signal plans. What's that plant signaling to me above the ground that's happening below the ground that I can't see? And exactly to what you said, that plant is there, and that plant is there to do a purpose. And the definition of weed is technically a plant not in its desired spot, but desired by who? Human? Because nature wants it. Like we've created it that it's not in its desired spot. And I guess like in a cornfield where it's all monoculture, you don't want that weed there. But that's the only time where that definition is true. In nature, there's an absolute purpose for everything, like you've just been so magically explaining.
Yeah, and then once you start to learn more about that particular weed and understanding what's it actually fixating in the soil, and maybe it's got uses for me as a human as well, I think that's when that magic really begins. But yeah, it's continuing to be an interesting process for us, because we are learning a lot, and we're trying to trial more ways to increase that fungi-based system. And being such a large land, and in the wet tropics, everything grows fast, the weeds and the trees. So it can be quite labor intensive. So one thing that I think is also important is to, wherever you are, like for us in the tropics, to go into the forest in the tropics and to observe what's growing naturally there. Because when you look into the rainforest, particularly the rainforest, but I think most forests, you see that literally every space and gap is filled by something, by some shrub, plant, vine, whatever it is. Like there's so many different layers, and that's what seems to make a healthy, thriving forest vibrant. And so, yeah, I'm trying to look for native ground covers and replace those dominating grass species with ground covers that that are native and that are in the forest, because I think that's also helping add to that diversity value. And this doesn't really fit in with your carbon credits sort of method of working, or it's more biodiversity, which is for me one of the most, I think, also very, very important. But to just try and understand why these plants are growing in the forest, and to bring them into the environment that you're working in, whatever it is. Even in my garden, I try and bring in forest plants, because I find that it's just incredible how quickly it works, but it increases that fungi network in the soil. And I can just see when I start to dig in the top layer of the soil, how rich and how dark and how beautiful it is. And when you start to see the little mushrooms popping up, it's always a good sign. Or just adding a log from the forest also seems to be very beneficial. And biochar, I think, is really helpful as well. So that's where I see like these traditional farming methods, when it's all about money and large scale farming, is almost missing the point. And it makes it really hard to bring in that healthy living system into the soil and into the earth. It's time intensive, takes time.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I have massive empathy for everyone who's in this space, because they are working with a system that guided them in a certain way. I often say that, some of the responsibility needs to be with the banks and the banking system, because they would only lend money to farmers to grow their enterprise if they had, quote unquote, clearable farmable land, farmable land. And farmable land was defined as cleared land. They'd had to remove these trees and remove this biodiversity so they could unlock capital to expand their farm. And now we fast forward 50 years later, and we realize that biodiversity collapse is happening everywhere, and the land is in stress. And I say to the banks, is that land still as high value that what you forced farmers to kind of go and do in a way of trying to keep their enterprise going, and then the inputs that needed to be put on in order to keep those yields going to subsidize the biodiversity collapse that had happened around a lot of these farms. So yeah, I think we've got a big task ahead of us to like rebuild. And I love the project that you're in, and what you're doing, and even just to be a showcase kind of model to show what is possible when you come together for less than 12 months and you're already sharing data points and things like this that probably some research labs haven't been able to put data together for the last 10 years of funding. So it's really exciting to hear what you're sharing. Are you ready to become the voice of the soils?
Sure, yes.
All right, let's do this. You have become the soil. You're embodied its power. You are there, and you've got a mouth and you've got a voice. What would you tell us, now 8 billion people on the planet Earth?
I would ask everybody, soil lovers especially, please be gentle with me. Please observe what's growing on top of me, and place your hands on me with love.
Yeah,
that's what I would ask.
We love that. Hands dirty, be caring. Touch it, feel it. I'm surprised how many people put gloves on now, and like they've got all this protective stuff, and they're not touching the of it all. And I love that what you've just taken us to that area. Before we wrap this show up, is there anything else that you wanted to share with our soul lovers? You're just a wealth of knowledge. I've loved your energy and your passion, and it really shines through, especially in the video version. If you're not following the video version, you're missing out on the full experience. I recommend you go and check out the video one where you can see us smiling and nodding, and the energy that's glowing from your space. Any final thoughts for our soul lovers?
Maybe the only thing I'd like to share is just to try and imagine how an untouched ecosystem would look like, and how beautiful that space would be, of how the plants and how the roots and how the trees and everything would grow when it hasn't been disturbed, and the life that would be there. And because I think that image, of however you may see that, is something that a lot of people seek on our holidays and in our times off, to go and visit somewhere that's natural, somewhere that's relaxing, somewhere that resets our nervous system and helps us calm down from the inside out. And that life is a part of the process of working with nature and trying to be in harmony with it rather than battling against it. And that's probably it. And I got this little sparkly spider just next to me as I'm talking about this with like all these colors on it. It's like, yeah.
I'm here.
Good confirmation. Yeah.
Not that you need it, you can tell that you've definitely on the right path. And I hope, I know that soil lovers of all types, we talk to people who are gardeners and we talk to people who are like broad acre farming systems, and we can all play a part. And, we have just ticked over 8 billion people on the planet. And I think, if everyone takes the attitude of like, well, one small action that I do doesn't matter, well, it really does matter. If you can just look at the world from that slightly different angle, even from this conversation, I think instead of a war on weeds, it's almost like a need for weeds, as the campaign.
Yeah.
So let's change the paradigm, and the amount of trees that you're ambitiously trying to grow and geotagging them, and data driven. I think this is really exciting to see that there are companies and projects and organizations and people that are taking these type of projects on and creating such a space that people can come and hang out. And I think you probably learn more volunteering on a farm like this than what you probably do in years of education through the current system. So I think there's a lot of wholesomeness that can be had and life lessons that you can take with you and share and inoculate around the world.
Direct experience. Yeah.
Experience always trumps knowledge in my world. If you know how to do something rather than just talking about it, walk the walk and then
Me too.
The talk. So Liana, it's been so great hanging out with you. Where can soil lovers find out more about the project and, maybe contribute to these tree planting exercises? What's the, links and ways that they can see what you're all about?
Find us on Climate Force, the website. So that's www.climateforce.org.au, and there'll be all information about us and getting in touch. And or through, if you want to volunteer, you can try and get in touch through Workaway or Woofing Australia.
Awesome. Workaway and Woofing and Climate Force. The links will always be around the videos or the show notes of whatever you are listening to us on. Well, soil lovers, that is it for today's show. I hope you got a lot out of it. I really encourage you to go out there and start looking at weeds a little bit differently and think about, these projects that are planting thousands and thousands and thousands of trees, and they're actually grown from the nursery. Like, I think that's really beautiful that each seed is grown in the nursery and then planted, geotagged and tracked. Like, that is just a wholesome project in itself. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for doing what you do, Ray, as well. Really inspiring that you're spreading so much good knowledge on soil.
I wouldn't change for the world. I love this learning experience and then gifting it to everyone to hear it over and over and over. So thank you. On that note, soil lovers, until next time, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into our wonderful world of soil. I'm Regen Ray. I'll catch you on the next show. Wait, before you hit the skip button, if you're a soil lover and love listening to my podcast, then I want you to discover more by getting access to my Patreon, where I share behind the scenes and bonus content that doesn't always make the conversations on the podcast. So head over to secretsofthesoil.com/support, where for a very small fee, you get to hang out with me and other soil lovers, where we get to geek out about soil and get access to exclusive content. It's very exclusive. No, not really. It's just a lot of fun and a way that we get to support this podcast together in order so that we can have deeper conversations all about soil from mentors all around the world. So what are you waiting for? Go on, show your support and token appreciation for this podcast. Until next time. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.